We love a double game week, don't we? Let's have a look at the game week 32 preview. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another game week preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems and general Premier League chat ahead of game week 32. I think the key one now, and the key one this week and the weeks ahead, is to hone in on game week planning. Now, I think Newcastle still remain the kings for me. Very nice double game week this week. They have a nice fixture at home to Ipswich in 34 as well, when some of us could be caught short with blanks. The blanks in game week 34 are the main thing to factor in when looking at your squad now. Crystal Palace, City, Villa and Arsenal will all blank in game week 34, having had those fixtures move forward to next game week in game week 33. So they will all be looking attractive now, but just make sure you're not overexposed for game week 34. I think the fact that we can steam into an Aston Villa double in 33 while also catching a game at Southampton this weekend in game week 32 is very nice, but I wouldn't expect many, if any, of their main options to start all three of those Premier League games, given the task they've set themselves in the Champions League, needing to overcome a 3-1 deficit against PSG. Now, if you're in catch-up mode, which I know some of you will be, then planning more than 2 weeks ahead is probably a luxury you probably can't afford. And my advice at this stage of the season is to focus on maximising the next 1 to 2 game weeks ahead, especially for head-to-head leagues. Unless you happen to have a particularly crunch head-to-head matchup, if you're vying for a spot with another manager and have a matchup looming with them in sort of 3 or 4 weeks' time, particularly in that blank game week 34, then you may in that scenario want to pay particular attention to how your team looks for those fixtures. If you missed it, you'll have noticed I got a bit bored at the weekend, got Draft FC Taz to pull out some data to have a look at whether our draft position in the summer is having any impact on league standings now, and also had a look at how head-to-head leagues standings compare against the total number of FPL points that managers have got. Also had a look at a couple of extreme examples of variance for teams who have done very well or have been very unlucky. So check that out. That was a YouTube video. If you listen on the audio mainly, then that only exists on YouTube, so you haven't missed a podcast. And the reason for that is there are a lot of visuals. I just felt it wouldn't translate as well to someone listening, having to follow along by themselves with a spreadsheet open. The spreadsheet as well that I use for that data is linked in the description for that video, so go and check it out after this one if you haven't watched it already. As ever, like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And for those listening on the audio, give us a follow on whichever podcast platform you are listening to. Now, I'm recording this episode on Thursday, the 10th of April, so any team news, injury developments, or press conference info are up to date as of then, and of course, subject to change. Not a lot of time, so let's get straight into it. So a reminder right at the top that the waiver deadline will be at the more conventional time this week of 11 a.m. UK summer time, Friday, the 11th of April, ahead of the main game week deadline, 24 hours later, 11 o'clock, Saturday morning. As ever, we kick things off with Waiver Watch. This data brought to you courtesy of the dashboards at Draft FC. So all of this is available to you should you be a signed up member. The players coming in, the main players coming in, there was a batch of players that had very high ownership increases last week, and that was Kyrgios, Concert and Dai, Marino and Tonali. Pretty good options there. And the players making way, Gabriel, Jorginho, Quansah and Kunku, Kusnov, Kulusevski and Rico Lewis. So overall, pretty good ins and outs. Pretty successful ins and outs there. In terms of key injuries and suspensions, the main ones really all involve the teams that played each other the other day, which is Palace and Brighton. Now, a couple of these, I believe the news was out prior to the weekend and I'd completely overlooked them. They were the injuries to Jorginho and to Webster, varying injuries, but it sounds like for both of them, their season could be over. And then aside from that, there were 3 red cards in that game, all 2 yellows. Van Hecke, he'll be back in game 33. And the Palace guys, Gay and Nketiah, will miss the first game in their double game week and will be back for the second one. So annoying if you're holding on to those, particularly Gay. I know a lot of you would have been holding on to him with a view to the double game week. So just be the single game for him now. And due to the nature of the fixtures of Palace, which aren't great, may even be enough to tip you over the edge into dropping him. But obviously Palace do have another double game week next week. Moving into the main picks then, and we've got a good handful here to talk about. In defence, Trippier is there, again, similar to last week, as a placeholder for Newcastle in general. Their double is 2 home games of Man United and Crystal Palace. As it stands, these numbers are for 10-team leagues. As it stands, Trippier is probably your easiest way in, but his ownership did go up a lot in the last few weeks, so he may not be there for you if you're in a more engaged draft league. But I would love to have, and indeed I do have a Newcastle defender because I managed to pick up Livramento last week. Kiwior again was on the most waived in list that we just had a look at. I still think he's worth bringing in if he is available in a home game against Brentford. Is pretty good. I've got a strong feeling that they will continue with the Saliba-Kiwior partnership in central defence because they don't really have a lot of other options, but would not be surprised if 1 or 2 of them were rested, given that they've got a big second leg coming up at the Bernabeu next week. Then we have got Maatsen for Aston Villa. And to say Aston Villa, as I mentioned at the top, they have got a game away at Southampton in game week 32 and then their double in game week 33. So I know they'll be very, very popular on the waivers. And I am reasonably sure that Maatsen will start this game. We saw him come in last week for the game against Nottingham Forest. Dean came back in for the game against PSG. I expect they'll want Dean again for the second leg. So it could be that Maatsen plays this week and next week, either side of that, to allow some rest. But a very good option and a very capable attacking left back against the worst team in the league, a team vying to be one of the worst teams in Premier League history. Villa really could throw out any 11 for this game and win it comfortably. So I think there's a good chance of a clean sheet, though we did say that last week against Spurs, and they got a consolation goal to ruin a few of our weekends. But yeah, I expect they will start with a heavily rotated 11, and if they need to in the second half, they might bring on the cavalry if needed, because they do still have to keep half an eye on the league, trying to get back into those Champions League spots, which, you know, probably will fall into 5th position this season. So would be gutting for a team like Villa, given where they are in the table, to miss out on that. And then finally is Bradley for Liverpool, who we saw come on as a substitute in their defeat to Fulham last weekend. Just 20% ownership in 10-team leagues means he will be plenty available for you. A nice home game against West Ham, so very good chance for clean sheet. And we know he can chip in with attacking returns, as he did off the bench last weekend. Into midfield, and again, no surprise, we're looking at Newcastle players. Now, Murphy was obviously one of the standout players in game week 31. Must have seen that I put his nice bulging biceps picture on the thumbnail for the 31 preview video. And then Joel Linton's up there too. Tonali is the other one who seems to be chipping in with a little bit at the moment, but I'd still fancy Joel Linton over Tonali just in the long run. He seems to do better. Realistically, in engaged leagues, a lot of these will be gone. Joel Linton's maybe the only one that you might find. His ownership remains less than 50% in 10-team leagues. But yeah, we know they're going to be popular. And if you haven't stacked already, then you're going to have a fight on your hands to pick these guys up. And then finally, Asensio, he came off the bench. He didn't start their first leg against PSG. So there's a good chance, and I believe I've got him penciled in to start in the Villa 11 at the moment. And we know that even if he has 45 minutes, doesn't need a lot of time for him to produce goal involvement, particularly in the Premier League. So yeah, there's another option we'll also be discussing very shortly, who I'm more certain of a start. But if I knew Asensio would start, then he would be my preferred option. Say, and double game week next week, probably will start one of those two as well. And then up top, we saw Fulkrug come back for West Ham. I think anyone that went with Ferguson can probably lob him back into the waiver pile. Fulkrug's ownership less than 50%. A tough fixture away at Liverpool. In fact, I think they've got a couple of tough fixtures now, West Ham. But, you know, it's a striker with minutes in his legs and potentially coming up for a start, so we can't afford to overlook. And Dai, again, we saw start, took the penalty against Arsenal last week. To be honest, most people held him, especially in the engaged leagues. Ownership still pushing 70%, so there won't be a lot of Ndai's flying around. And then finally, Callum Wilson, who, you know, whether he starts or not, I expect he'll get, 20 to 30 minutes off the bench in both of those fixtures. But there's also the gamble that he may start one and come off the bench in one. So a good option just for this double game week coming up, and a player that I've brought in as my third forward in my main draft league last week. into hidden gems and really using a lot of the same logic here. The main one really to highlight at the top, slightly different, is Ryan Sessegnon. If we look at the last 3 game weeks, there are 3 players clear in terms of non-penalty expecting goal involvements. Rodrigo Muniz is proving a very useful forward option. He's at the top. Jacob Murphy, maybe unsurprisingly, is number 2. And then next is Muniz's teammate at Fulham, Ryan Sessegnon, with 2 goals and an assist from 96 minutes. Bench minutes for 4 game weeks in a row, and then got a rare start last weekend in game week 31. Deployed in a bit of a hybrid role. He was wide right, more advanced. Obviously, Castagna was on the pitch, very much more defensively minded. But whether you would call Sessegnon a wing-back or a right winger, doesn't really matter. It was certainly more advanced than a conventional fullback. And I said last week that Fulham's run on the fixture on paper didn't look good. Really a big part of that was the fact that they had Liverpool right up on the horizon, which they've obviously navigated with a win. They do have Southampton away in game week 34, Everton at home in game week 36, so I expect Fulham players will still be in and out of the waiver pile. Someone like Sessegnon, though, I think given this little purple patch he's going through, if he did start the remainder of the games they've got, if you're in a larger league, could be an interesting one, considering he's an out-of-position defender. So not only will he get these attacking returns, but if they do keep a clean sheet, he'll be well in the money. Next is Alex Moreno for Forest. We know that Aina is out. We were trying to work out what options they would go with last weekend. The reason Alex Moreno wasn't the option is because they were playing Aston Villa, and so he wasn't able to play against his parent club. But that problem is now gone, and Forest have a nice home game against Everton. Just 3% ownership in 10-team leagues, so a very nice 1 to 2 week punt there. And then next on the list is really just the rest of the Aston Villa defence that I think could start in the league this weekend. So we've got Mings, Dizazi and Garcia. Garcia I've actually got as twigged as a bit of a most hidden gem pick too, because his ownership is less than 1% in 16-team leagues, so I won't dredge over that. Again, we'll just talk about them here. We saw Torres, Konsa and Cash start with Dean last night, though Cash did come off for Dizazi around half-time. Not quite sure what's going on with him, but I would not be surprised if we saw a full rotation with a completely new back four, and still very much good enough to get the job done against Southampton. So it seems like a bit of a no-brainer to me, and all very, very low ownership. Mings is the one we've seen a decent number of starts for in recent weeks, so he'd be my preferred one because he's probably the safest to come in. And then in midfield, really just one name, and that's the name I was alluding to when we were talking about Asensio, and sticking with the Aston Villa theme, and that is Marlon, whose ownership has gone down. It peaked right at the beginning when he first came in. I think I was one of the ones that waved him in when he first joined, but ownership down to 4% now in 10-team leagues, so he's pretty much there for all of you. And I would say with more than 90% certainty that Marlon will start this league game. And against Southampton, he really could fill his boots. That's really as technical as this analysis is going to be. I'm fairly certain he'll start. It's a good team, and they're playing a really bad team. Predicted lineups have been done. The only thing really that could throw a spanner in the works is Spurs. And Chelsea have European ties still to play this evening on Thursday night. So if there are any major injuries there, but I'm expecting a fair amount of rotation for both of those teams respectively anyway. So if there was an injury, I doubt it will throw a massive spanner in the works for the league teams that I'm predicting. And if you, as I say, similar to last week, if you see any odd players in the predictions, probably isn't a mistake. It's probably me just trying to predict where some of those swaps are going to be. So that is it for this episode. I say not too many surprising options really there. I say it could be difficult in terms of just trying to work out your sort of order of preference for some of these guys, but really we're looking at them for 1 to 2 game weeks, and over such a small, whether that's one or particularly 1 game week, over such a small sample size of minutes, really the first thing is trying to work out who's going to play. Once you've done that, it's in the lap of the gods after that. And anyone that's convincing you that Marlon or Asensio is a dramatically better pick, one or the other, is pure guesswork at this point. And so the reason I would edge towards someone like Marlon is because I'm just that a little bit more assured that he's going to start. But all of this is easy if you've got a crystal ball. If I could tell you the lineups right now, it would make life super easy for all of us, and we could make some good decisions. But it's all a risk. It's all a game of risk, and your appetite for that will depend on how you're doing in your league. So another reminder, the waiver deadline is 11 a.m. Friday the 11th, so get them penciled in nice and early. And it's that week that comes around every year where my attention will be divided between the football and the Masters, which I love watching every year. And I've mentioned it before that our league do a draft game within our draft league, which revolves around the Masters tournament. We do it. This is the 4th year in a row now that I organise it. It's done very officially. There's a rule book, money in, penalties, etc. Got a spreadsheet set up which pulls in all of the live scores and aggregates them. Essentially, we all draft 4 players. They have to meet certain criteria. So we have to have an American, an international player, someone with kind of long odds to play. And we also all pick a Judas player, aka a Live Golf Tour player. So 4 players each, cumulative score by the end of the week. Whoever's got the lowest wins. And in fact, let me show you, see if I can show you the spreadsheet, because it's probably up lurking in the background here. Yeah, so this is the spreadsheet. So you can see each of our little teams of 4 and then aggregates into the overall score here. So got a couple of players off to a good start here. I need to see what's going on there. None of my guys have teed off yet, so no time to panic. But yeah, we love this and do it every year. And I have posted before, if anyone's interested in doing something similar, it's probably a bit late now. I'm more than happy to share all the materials and a link to the spreadsheet if you want to do something similar yourselves. But anyway, back to business, and best of luck for the waivers. Best of luck for your matchups. As I said, those head-to-head leagues, really every win, every loss counts now. There's not a lot of time to catch up that ground if you need to. So put the work in, think about who you're playing, and do not forget your waivers. The manager who is currently sitting, or was currently sitting top of our league, made the fatal error the other day of forgetting a waiver window, and it's definitely setting back a bit. So, high stakes, high rewards now. Don't forget your waivers. Pencil them in now if you think you might forget tomorrow. And until next time, stay shook.